In the shadow of Mount Hood, in northern Oregon, lies the North American Bigfoot Center, a meeting ground for Sasquatch researchers and fans alike. The museum is owned by Cliff Barackman, one of the hosts of Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot, and since the museum opened its doors in 2019, it's become a highlight of the region, with exclusive presentations, exhibits, and events. But what many don't realize is just how much work it took to get there.
I worked on Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot television show for basically 9 years, and when the show went off the air, I was kind of faced with this thing. Okay, well, I've got to work, so am I going to go back into the classroom? I was an elementary school teacher before the television show came up, so that was the most reasonable option. But during the 9 years of the television show, my credential had elapsed, so I would have to go and take more units and renew it and all that stuff. So I was kind of looking around like, how can I continue the Bigfoot thing? Because I'm really interested in the subject, I'm interested in the animals, I want to continue researching them. And it turns out that a couple of my friends own museums. For example, Lauren Coleman owns the International Cryptozoology Museum out in Maine. Dave and Melinda own Expedition Bigfoot out in Georgia. And my friends kind of came to me and said, well, why don't you open up a Bigfoot museum? I mean, you have a bunch of stuff, you were an educator, this seems perfect. And I kind of started thinking, it's like, well, that kind of is perfect.
As Cliff began to take the idea of starting a museum seriously, it helped that he wasn't alone in this venture. He had his wife with him, Melissa.
My name is Melissa Barackman, and I am a co-owner of the North American Bigfoot Center. I met Cliff. I was working production on Finding Bigfoot, and I can't remember what season it was, but I had gotten a call to go on, and I worked, I think, about 6 or 7 episodes, maybe 8. And by the time it ended, we were, interested in each other. And then once we dated, I didn't go back on the show because that's kind of weird, right? But we long distance dated, and it was really good. It was really fun. And now we're here. Look at us now.
Melissa is an artist in herself. I mean, she's a very quirky, eccentric artist, to say the least. But when we needed certain little accents, I guess, for the museum, she stepped up and delivered. Like a lot of the rock wall stuff that you see in the museum, well, she made the rock walls. I don't know how to make rock, and it's not real rock, of course, so she had to make it. So she added a lot of flavor to the museum. That's important and everything, but by far the largest contribution to the museum that I feel she's made, for me personally, is just supporting me.
I was pretty excited because I thought that was a way that he could keep Bigfoot a part of his life. And I know that we have so many casts in our garage and they just sit there. And it's kind of a shame because there's a lot of evidence, a lot of things he's collected over the last probably 30 years. And the fact that we could put it on display, I thought it was really a great way to do that.
Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I know I have. I went looking and I saw a video he made recently, and I was shocked. Dude is in his 80s and is still working out, staying active, and kicking butt. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, can work out for longer, and still has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by making just one change, and he says he feels like he's still in his 50s. His wife started doing the same thing, and she says that she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, looks leaner, and has more energy than ever before. Chuck made a special video that explains everything, and you can check it out by going to chuckdefense.com/town or by clicking the link in the description of this video. It will literally change the way you think about your health. Again, that's chuckdefense.com/town or click the link below. Just a reminder that the legendary Chuck Norris is 84 years old and has more energy than a lot of guys half his age, including me. He discovered he could make dramatic changes to his health by focusing on 3 things that sabotage our bodies as we age. Check it out once again by going to chuckdefense.com/town or clicking the link below. Boom, boom. Chuck Norris.
United as a team, the idea began to grow. Between Cliff's personal collection of casts to his deep knowledge of the subject, he knew he could make a museum. But both he and Melissa knew that it would be different from the others. One, because each Bigfoot-themed museum reflects the personalities of its owners, and two, because of the location.
We didn't have any place in mind, we didn't have a space. So that was the next step. Basically finding a place that was big enough that would, fit everything and actually fit all the people, even with special needs. That was important to us too. So what did that building look like? Where could we get that building?
I remember one day I was driving on Highway 26, I think I was going home, and this facility that we're in, this complex, a number of buildings, they were working on it at the time, and I kind of looked over and I thought, I should drop by. And I found a gentleman out in front of Chester's bar next door, and he was working on stuff, hammering everything, and I spoke to him, and it turns out he was a landlord, a guy named Jason. So I started talking to him, and after a little while, we kind of developed some sort of relationship, and a building opened up. This building used to be a motorcycle garage. So imagine a motorcycle garage. You come in the front door, there's a small office and whatnot, then there's a large open area in the back with high ceilings and that sort of thing to work, for the mechanics to work on the bikes and stuff. Well, that's perfect for a museum. The front part could be a gift store. The back part could be the display halls, beautiful high ceilings, cement floors, big open area. It was absolutely perfect.
It was almost like, I can't believe there's not a Bigfoot museum here. Because it's so popular, and it's just pop culture even, in the Pacific Northwest. And I know there are some, but not like what we're doing in a way. I thought we were doing something different, and what everyone else is doing is so great. And, they're the reason that we're doing it.
Another crucial step to starting a business is the name. With other museum names like Expedition Bigfoot in Georgia or the Sasquatch Outpost in Colorado, Cliff and Melissa were faced with the task of creating a name for their museum that was different, but still conveyed the museum's mission.
Years ago, I had a blog, like before television, I had a blog when blogs were a bigger thing called North American Bigfoot. I didn't name it after myself because I never really thought, even on the TV show, I never really thought that it was about me. I didn't want to be center stage. It's not about Cliff, it's about Sasquatches. So, and of course, and I'd never dreamed at that point I would ever, go to Asia or Australia or anywhere like that looking for other Sasquatch-like animals. So I thought North American Bigfoot would be an appropriate term because I figured all my Bigfooting would be confined to North America. But, I guess it was like foreshadowing to the life that was going to come to me on finding Bigfoot, traveling the world and, 46 states looking for these things and stuff. So the North American Bigfoot part was already established. That was my blog. I've got an email called North American Bigfoot. The center part, I thought about museum for a while, but that doesn't really fit the bill because we're so much more than that. Center seemed to be an appropriate term because we're more than a museum. We're way more than a gift shop. We do research, we do archival work, we do outreach. There's a ton of stuff that we do here. So I think center is a nice umbrella term for anything that we want to put underneath it.
With the name and location decided upon, it was now down to the actual design, the look and feel of the museum.
We started developing the North American Bigfoot Center in 2019. Well, I didn't know what I was doing, of course, so I asked my friend who does know what he's doing to help me out, a guy named Scott Minton.
I'm Minty, and I am a creative. I guess that's a catch-all term for designer, artist, entrepreneur, weirdo. Essentially making my living by doing graphic design, interior design, working on creative projects of various sorts with amazing clients and interesting people. I'm lucky enough that I somehow get paid to do that.
Cliff and Minty met in the early 2000s at a BFRO expedition in Mendocino, California. While on this outing, they found out that they lived only 3 blocks away from each other in Long Beach and became fast friends. However, as finding Bigfoot took off and Cliff's time grew limited, it was a few years and fate that brought them back together in Oregon.
I was living in LA and I got headhunted to be a creative director for a design firm up here. and I moved up and was kind of kicking around Portland, and I still talked to Cliff occasionally, but we had lost touch because of the distance. We just started hanging again. And then one day he called me up and he was like, hey, you do that design stuff. Do you think you could help me with the museum? And I was like, sure. I wrote him up like a proposal, like a design proposal, like, this is what it costs to do a museum. And it was like, I'm gonna give him a bro deal. So it'd be like, to design and build your museum, you pay me like 35 grand. And he was just like, what? Like as soon as he described like wanting to do this museum, I had this idea of like this grandiose, like fully immersive, like environment that like just tells people everything that they want to ever know about Bigfoot, because Cliff's the man. He's got it all in his garage. Like he's got it all in his head. He's got it all on the hard drive. Like I think that dude like literally knows everything that you can possibly know about Bigfoot. Needless to say, we negotiated. Didn't cost that much, and we just jumped into it, and it was a fiasco. It was amazing, the most fun I've ever had on a project up to that point, but we were so naive. It was awesome, because like I sit behind a computer and I, imagine these things, design them, engineer them down to like a couple inches. I get fabricators to build them, and there's like teams of people doing this stuff, but I don't execute them myself. And this was like, okay, here's an empty building, like let's make a museum. We just like started banging around and figured out that like we were in way over our heads with the building itself. It had tons of problems, it's a very old building, neglected. I think it was like a weed grow operation or something before we moved in there. And I was like, I think you have to like let the county know that you're gonna do this thing, like make a business. And they were like, okay, I guess so. Let's do the right thing. And the county building inspector was like, hold on, you guys, like, let's go back to square one. And basically we had to become like general contractors and like figure out all of the building codes in Clackamas. And the Clackamas building codes book is like 3 of these with no help. It's just, suffice it to say, we pulled it off. And it was amazing. I learned a ton of shit. I built a bathroom. I never built a bathroom before. Like I was like, you're gonna have the most amazing bathroom that any museum has ever had. And to this day, I think it's still an art gallery. Like I was like, this should be an art gallery. It's beautiful. Like I would eat off the floor when we built it and wiping it down thoroughly, but would still have eaten like a hot dog off there maybe. Yeah, it was just this like, the same reason I'm sitting here in this record shop is probably, the same reason that like Cliff and my paths crossed, because there's this like greater force that is propelling us all forward, and Cliff, like me, just kind of like is like, yeah, gets on it and surfs it like a wave and goes with it. And it was just this like synchronistic, fortuitous experience where we just started off with one idea and learned like a billion things along the way. And I stepped away from the museum after the gift shop was built, and we had like I think it was a pretty strong template for what the museum ultimately became. And there was some time passed before I actually went and visited the museum as a patron, like walked through the doors and then experienced it, and I was just amazed. It's like everything that I had imagined it would be, but better. It's just like completely evident how much work and time and love that Cliff and Melissa put into it.
Although Minty stepped away from the NABC design process, his fingerprints still reside in the current iteration of the museum. In the bathroom that he designed and built, the footprints on the floor, and some of the amazing rock work that Melissa built. But most notably, in the logo.
Cliff and I both agreed. We wanted to do something that was recognizable, but this just wasn't played out. I mean, even at that point, we just had seen enough of Patty, you know? So this is the logo. I think it came out a little better than this. It's close. Mid-tarsal break right there. Yeah, it's definitely been a while. Oh, look, here's like, these are secrets. Not everyone can draw. Sometimes you just gotta like redraw and redraw again and again and again. I think I drew Murphy, that's his name by the way, I think I drew Murphy like 50 times before we got the right one. I'm very hypercritical of everything I do, and when I look back at the NABC stuff, I'm like, I like everything that we did. Like, I'm stoked on it. I'm like I built the cash register stand, you know, like I selected every piece of wood and like sanded it down and stained it, and we put that time into it, and it's still there and it works. And it's like, there's the little pieces of me in that place, but there's tons of pieces of all types of stuff, and that makes it special.
So with designs in place, a logo, a name, and a location, it was time to start putting it all together.
As we were developing the museum, I mean, the money was going away pretty quick. You know, it took a lot longer than I expected it to. So we actually had to do a soft opening, is what we called it, in August of 2019, where we literally just opened the gift store, the front room. We had Murphy, you know, back in there. We had a few displays here and there, but it was nothing like it is today.
So that way we at least were, you know, having customers and we kind of get like a feel of how it's going to go. And then while we're working in the back, we actually are at the front selling things too.
So if Cliff and Melissa were in the front working the gift store, then who was in the back building?
My name's Keith Boyce. I have been with the museum, you know, since we opened the doors, before we opened the doors actually, so about 4.5 years or so. 4.5 years ago, I was employed by Cliff Barackman to build this museum, and he employed me, and I never went away.
Keith is our savior. He came in and took charge and built it in 6 weeks. It was, I mean, nothing was done back there, and he made it work, and he was so nice to work with, and he's got such skills.
A mutual friend of Cliff and Melissa's is a friend of my wife's. So they pointed me in their direction and I in theirs. And we met and made a deal and started building. When I got here, the gift shop was open. It was pretty sparse yet. We've done a lot since. And the bathroom was ready, you know, it was put together, but nothing else had been built at all. So we built all the stand-up panels that the displays are on with the TV monitors and all that. The very first thing I started to build was the theater room for the museum. So building the cabin sides and the roof line on the cabin. And yeah, that was the very first thing I started to work on here. He pretty much left it up to me to make that happen. Now I checked in with him all the time and wanted to make sure he got what he wanted, but he's pretty easygoing about letting me kind of design that look. So I feel pretty lucky to do that. In my mind, I have to look at it in terms of, is it going to be functional? Is it going to be easy to use? Is it going to highlight the artifact more than the case itself? I don't want the case to be the star. I want the artifact to be the star of the show. So that comes into play. And, you know, is it going to fit the feel of the museum and keep it consistent? So we have a cohesive look. I don't care if anybody knows that I did it. I just want to see people go, man, that was cool. If I hear that, it made my day.
And they loved it then. They loved the museum when it was just the gift store and a few things hanging up on the wall. It's so funny to me because people come in even today and they say, oh yeah, I've been here before. So when's the last time you were here? Oh, it was right after you opened. And I'm thinking, then you haven't been here before, man. Yeah, because if you like that, we're just gonna blow your mind with what we have going on now.
It was so exciting to finally open the back, because everybody would come in and when's that gonna, when can we get back there? We're like, oh, we're working on it, and this poor Keith is back there sweating, And anything we asked, he just knew how to do it, and and he's so nice and humble and sweet. Great guy.
However, no Bigfoot museum is complete without a life-size replica of a Bigfoot.
Murphy is behind me here, and he is our life-size, very realistic Sasquatch model. I first put eyes on Murphy at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference a number of years ago. There's an artist out in Columbus, Ohio named Bo Bruns. He has one of these companies that makes like real scary stuff for those haunted houses, like the animatronics and all that sort of thing. But he's also a Bigfooter. And through his years of doing Bigfoot stuff, he applied his art, his artistic talents, to make the most realistic Sasquatch replica I have ever seen.
And he did such an amazing job with this Bigfoot. He made it, and he sent us pictures from like clay to molding to fabrication, and then latex and hair, and we have it all in the exhibit as well to kind of show you how he was made. And it's such an amazing process. And obviously I love special effects and movies, so it was really interesting to see how they made Murphy.
And Murphy is very cool for lots of reasons. We have the sound effect thing that happens when you step on a pad. It kind of adds a little ambiance to the thing. Tourists love it. Three-year-olds are very often very afraid of this thing, and they actually see the thing, yell, and then run out the door, And of course, we're terrible people, so we laugh about that. But the parents apparently are too. They laugh about it too. But the most important thing for Murphy is that whenever a witness comes into the museum that has observed a Sasquatch either for an extended period of time or perhaps from very close range, I bring them in the back and say, hey, this is Murphy. You saw one up close. Tell me what's the same, tell me what's different about what you saw compared to this model here. And they nitpick, and I want them to, like, oh, there's more hair here, maybe the skin was a different shade, or the hair was a different shade, maybe it was longer in a certain spot. And they nitpick a little bit, but universally, they all walk away saying, this is by far the most realistic version of what I saw that I've ever seen.
Standing at 7.5 feet tall, Murphy is an intimidating model. Easily dwarfing large people, Murphy puts into perspective just how different Sasquatch are from people, not only in height, but also width and facial features. In 2024, Cliff and Melissa commissioned Bo Bruns for another baby Murphy to go in the museum. So while Murphy gets the spotlight, keep an eye out and you might just see a little foot lurking around the corner. But the creation of the NABC was not all fun and games. As with any business, money and outside factors come into play that can either make it or break it.
Of course, one of the biggest challenges for me, and I think for any entrepreneur, would be money, essentially. But luckily, I was on a TV show for 9 years. Remember, I was an elementary school teacher before I was on television, so I wasn't making much money before I went on TV. I mean, TV doesn't earn you a lot of money, but as the seasons go on, I started earning what I thought was good money. I just started saving it all. I wasn't spending it. Even when I was on TV all those years, I never really changed my standard of living. I always lived like I didn't really have very much money. So I was able to sock away quite a bit of money into savings. So that's where the funding came for the NABC. I was lucky in that way that I had saved so much money and I didn't have to take out any loans, because very soon after we opened, COVID hit and we had to shut down. It was absolutely horrifying when COVID hit. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I don't think any of us really wanted to believe it, of course. But we had opened the business 3 months or 4 months before, and we're just crawling along, barely making enough to cover rent, and sometimes not even making enough to cover rent and having to dip into my savings to cover it. And then we had to shut the business down, just completely shut our doors to all business for months. It almost killed us. It literally almost killed the entire business. And of course, at that point, my savings was drained. So I didn't know what I was going to do. Throughout the entire building process, and certainly into the COVID era, I was not doing well. I was lucky to get maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. My health was suffering because of the stress. I was a mess. I'm a stressor to begin with, but that really pushed me right at the edge. Like it was really bad. Luckily, Melissa was there to support me, of course. Our relationship has never wavered at all. She's a rock that I don't think she appreciates, really. As we were allowed to slowly start reopening after COVID kind of died down a little bit, the interest in Bigfoot is here, so people did start coming in. And slowly the business started building, and I started thinking, God, maybe we're gonna be okay, I mean, we weren't making a lot of money, but rent was covered, and I live very, very simply, and Melissa's a blessing, and she also lives very simply along with me. So we don't need a lot of money, as long as the bills are covered, we're fine. And at that point, the bills were just being covered, and we could pay our rent, we could pay the electricity. We didn't have really employees at that point, so that wasn't a concern. So we were doing okay. Not great, but compared to what we had been through, I'll take it.
After surviving through COVID, the rest of the museum began to take shape. With the back now fully opened, people were able to experience Murphy and the other incredible exhibits that the NABC has to offer.
The process of collecting artifacts honestly started back, I think, in the 1990s with me. I remember in the very, very early days of internet, right when I first started Bigfooting, essentially, I was hanging out with my brother one time, and he says, you gotta check this out, this thing called the internet. I go, what is that? He says, you can look up anything. I go, what do you mean, anything? Anything. And there's information out there on it. I'm thinking, whatever. And so, oh yeah, try Bigfoot. And he looked up Bigfoot, and sure enough, Bigfoot stuff came up. I think it was Peter Burns' Bigfoot Research Project. They had a webpage at the time. And then Dr. Grover Krantz at the time was selling Sasquatch footprint cast replicas with the help of one of his graduate students online. And looking back, I wish I bought every single one of them. But I was like 24 or something at the time. I didn't have any money. So I said, oh my God, it blew my mind. And I remember the very, very first thing I ever got was the Paul Freeman knuckle cast, which I still have today, and it's thrilling, And boy, talk about full circle. There's a whole story there too. But the Paul Freeman knuckle cast was literally the first artifact I ever purchased, and it was back in like 94 or 95 maybe, or something like that. And then slowly I started acquiring other footprint casts because I thought that the casts were particularly important, because the presence of casts really contradicts that idea that there is no hard evidence for Bigfoot. To paraphrase Renee DeHinden, if casts aren't hard evidence, let me hit you over the head with one. You tell me if it's hard. Those are hard evidence, you can share with other people, It's not just sighting reports, which are kind of squishy evidence at best. I got the Patterson-Gimlin right foot that Roger and Bob cast that day. And then I think I got a titmus cast somehow from '58. I don't remember how I got that. But then it just kind of snowballing. So most of my early artifacts were actually footprint casts or handprint casts. And from there, as my interest grew and evolved, more and more things just started coming. I have a pretty formidable book collection at this point, some really unique items in there. And tchotchkes and mugs and all that sort of stuff as I traveled around doing my Bigfoot thing. And now we've gone to far more serious areas of like historic records and research collections and that sort of thing.
There's tons to look at in the NABC, and the exhibits are changing all the time. So for the sake of this film, we'll only be highlighting the major exhibits, starting with the Patterson-Gimlin wall.
The Patterson-Gimlin film is, of course, is iconic, and it's a centerpiece of the Bigfoot evidence collection, The Patterson-Gimlin film section of the museum, we don't show the film itself out of respect for the Patterson family, but we do have a lot of artifacts associated with the film. Like this was given to the museum by Dr. Russ Jones, a great researcher and a good friend of mine out in West Virginia. This is an original poster advertising Roger Patterson on tour with the film. After he got the film, Roger went on tour and kind of showed it in coliseums and movie theaters and stuff. And this was from when he showed the film at the Portland Coliseum and the Spokane Coliseum, the local events. Now, of great interest to me, of course, being the Bigfoot nerd I am, at the Spokane Coliseum, there was a young Dr. Jeff Meldrum in the audience. I think he was 10 years old at the time. This is what got Jeff on the path. And we happen to have a poster of it here at the museum. Now that is super cool. Someone else in the audience that night was my good friend Kevin Llewellyn. He was also at the Spokane gig. And Kevin donated to the museum his original newsletters from the Northwest Research Association, Roger Patterson's kind of Bigfoot club that he had at the time, including his original membership certificate and Roger Patterson's autograph. I've never seen an original Roger Patterson's autograph in all my 30 years of Bigfooting until Kevin brought this in and gave it to the museum. That is cool. I thought it would be a fun thing to do to kind of recreate the work that Dr. Grover Krantz did in the end of his book, Bigfoot Sasquatch Evidence, where he noted that every step that Patty took, her foot comes up basically perpendicular to the ground. So we get to see the entire underside of her foot. So what I did is I took that picture of Patty where you can see the entire underside of her foot, and I put a footprint cast from her foot next to it. So I blew up the picture until her foot was the same size as the footprint cast. Now, of course, I don't own those stills, but I'm lucky enough to know Eric DeHinden. Eric was Renee's son, and Renee bought all of the stills from the film. He owned all of the stills from the film in print. So I reached out to Eric and I said, Eric, I've got this idea, the thing Krantz did back in the day to kind of show approximately how big Patty is. And he goes, oh yeah. So I asked him, may I use your still for the museum? And he was happy to oblige, of course. Our recreation is very conservative. She's probably larger than that because of the fuzziness on the outside of the foot and how you multiply that numerous times. It's probably about 6 inches taller than that. But she's big. Even at the very shortest that she is, she's like a barrel walking around on 2 legs. She is extraordinarily large in every way, not only in width, but girth as well. And that's what I wanted to show with that display. Also on display here at the North American Bigfoot Center is a replica of the Olympic Project nests. I've been lucky enough to have been to the nest site. I was one of the first people on the second nest site after Todd and Shane discovered that. And so we have a display here dedicated to just that. I suggested to the Olympic Project folks a while back, like, why don't you try to make a nest to see how hard it is? And they eventually did so, without tools and stuff. And I think that was an interesting experiment. And Shane took that information in their experiment and did a presentation at a local convention called Squatch Fest about their efforts there. And he made that replica nest and brought it to Squatch Fest to show everybody. Well, after the fact, the guys were generous enough to donate the nest to the museum here. So we have their experimental nest on display here at the museum, along with some other stuff from the nest site. Obviously, there's photographs and information on it and that sort of thing. But also, the second nest site was very interesting to me because Shane and Todd discovered the thing, and then I was there just a few days after. They called me and invited me up to go check it out. When we were up there, of course, we were looking for hair. We gathered a bunch of nesting material that we also went through for hair samples, and we have like an envelope full of the stuff. But we have a glass tube featuring real nesting material from the second nest site, but also on display. While we're at the second nest site looking around, I cast footprints. I cast Sasquatch footprints that we found underneath the nesting material, which is interesting because that means the footprints were placed there before the nesting material, right? So we have one of the 3 footprints I think I cast at the site on display here along with the nest, and you just can't see that anywhere else. One of the newest collections that we've been, honored basically to curate is the Paul Freeman collection. All of his casts will soon be here at the museum. Michael Freeman, who's a good friend of mine, and I made an arrangement, and they're going to come here so they can continue educating, because that was really important to Paul. I never met Paul, but a lot of my friends have. And Paul actually gave a couple casts to my friend Tom Powell just because he was a teacher and he wanted students to have access to this kind of information. So Michael and I think that the NABC is an excellent place to house the Paul Freeman footprint cast collection so they can continue giving back to the community and shaping the next generation of Bigfooters coming up. This is the original Paul Freeman research map. I mean, Paul and Wes Summerlin and Bill Lowry and Dr. Krantz and Dar Addington and all of those Blue Mountain folks all working together to try to gather evidence, put all of their information on this map. Well, actually, it's 9 maps kind of glued together. And this was hanging in Paul Freeman's basement for many, many years. And just whenever something happened, a footprint, a sighting, whatever, they would add it to the map. And this sort of data gathering is very, very important. Remember, it's pre-digital. People do it on Google Maps or whatever nowadays, but this is pre-digital stuff. And this map and his collection of data actually led to Paul filming a Sasquatch in 1992, because right here, he noticed all these different things were happening, usually in August and September. So Paul started going to this location pretty much every day after work. Now, Paul, I believe at that time he was a meat cutter that worked overnight. So he'd get off at like 4 in the morning. Then he'd go up to Deduck Springs pretty much every morning. And then eventually in August of 1992, he actually filmed a Sasquatch there. But it was this prevalence of data and the pattern that he saw that led to the film. It's really neat to be able to honor Paul and his memory in a place like the NABC, where we get young people every day coming through here and wanting to learn more about the subject. And Paul is well represented here, and I think he would be proud.
The NABC is a mesmerizing place, and the longer you look, the more you see. An entire documentary could be made on each exhibit in the museum. But the backstory of each piece is handled well by Cliff and the rest of the team. In addition to the physical collection of artifacts on display, the NABC has an online membership component as well.
Our membership is a Patreon thing, so it's like a subscription sort of deal. The benefits of being a member, there's quite a few, I think. It's mostly information. Because if I think something is important in the news, I'll post it to our members. And then I'll write my opinion on it and that sort of stuff. When something new and important comes up in the Bigfoot community, like a new piece of evidence or whatever, I will share that with the members as well. They get first dibs on, member nights and all that sort of stuff at a discount. But I think the real meat on the bone of the membership thing, the real value of the membership would be our documentaries that we make. Every single month we make 2 short documentary films about our own field research or deep dives into pieces of evidence. They're about 10 to 20 minutes long, and they're what we're really doing out in the field. I mean, they're not flashy. They're not wonderfully produced. They're, me with a video camera out there showing what's going on and talking about what we're finding out there, and then we piece it together. But it's real Bigfoot research, boots on the ground, out in the field, looking at real stuff. And as far as I can tell, nobody else is doing that. I don't pay a lot of attention, but it seems that we're offering probably the highest level Bigfoot content available online anywhere. No offense to small town monsters.
As the NABC added all the exhibits and artifacts, the museum began to take on staff members. While he is no longer with the NABC, Connor Anderson was perhaps one of the first team members at the museum. Connor has been featured in Small Town Monsters documentaries before, taking myself and others out to various research spots. Connor left an indelible mark on the NABC, and I know that his presence is missed. However, there is a team of people that help make the NABC special. One such person is Keith, who helps build the displays and works at the shop at least 1 day a week.
Oh yeah, now I've kind of taken a shift just to help out. I just work on Tuesdays, 1 day a week, unless they need me to cover for somebody else, and then I'll come and do that. But otherwise, I'm just working on museum stuff.
My name is Dave Ryan, and I work at the North American Bigfoot Center. I was hired in August 2021. This is a dream job, really. I mean, this is really the dream job. And I used to come in here before going out to research. And I would see Cliff and I'd say, hey man, what's up? Anything new, anything fresh? And one day he said, how would you like to come work for me? So I was like, let me think about it. Because at the time I work from home. I have time to go out and research this. So I thought about it for a while and I said, yeah, that'd be fun. Figure out where the Sasquatch are. I want to see a Sasquatch, So
my name's Nico Spatafora. I'm a manager and professional tracker and scientist guy at the museum, and also the owner and paleontologist at the fossil team. I started working at the museum about 3 years ago when Cliff asked if I could come in and help on the weekends, earning a little extra cash on the side to help fund my fossil addiction. And also, sorry.
No, it's perfect.
I'll start.
Just keep going.
Keep going. Okay. Also help him out because he needed some extra hands at the shop. And that eventually led into him offering me a full position, being kind of the resident science guy there. And that eventually evolved into manager as well, as you know, we've grown and as the data just keeps evolving and growing and becoming more and more exciting.
With people coming from a variety of backgrounds, it's interesting that many of the current team at the NABC were not always Bigfoot believers.
I do now, but when I first worked on the show, I did not. I thought it was hilarious.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I listened to George Norrie back in the day, and I thought those Bigfoot stories were scary, but I don't know if they were, believable, like really happening. I don't know, because we aren't the best observers, and I think a lot of people could scare themselves. But yeah, now I definitely do. Yes. And on the show, actually, I heard my first Bigfoot
Really?
when I was in Turner, Maine. And then the second one I heard was out here in Mount Hood. Yeah, it was really scary because I was by myself and I was carrying sticks up and to where they were filming, and I'm running back by myself, and I'm like, what? It was just like the sound, like the vocalization was so close and terrifying.
I was always open to the idea of Sasquatch being a real animal. I mean, I wasn't as aware of the data before the museum, of course, but it just made the most biological sense to me out of all of the cryptids that were out there. And so I was open to it, but wasn't fully on board yet. And then when I started working at the shop and learning more and more, and then eventually kept finding more and more evidence and dealing with more and more people, it just kind of slowly dawned on me that it was like, oh, this is a real thing. This is something I can study. And lo and behold, it led into sightings and footprints and lots of other stuff. And it's been a blast.
Another integral facet of the NABC is fieldwork. The museum itself is there to educate the public on the existence of Sasquatch, compiling footprint casts, audio, and other information. But it is also a center for the collection and analysis of information found out in the field.
The museum is located in Clackamas County, Oregon. And that's not just because it's an easy commute for me, because I also live here, but also Clackamas County has the highest number of Sasquatch reports in all of Oregon. Now, of course, that's because there's a lot of Sasquatch habitat here, and there's also a lot of people nearby, in Portland and the suburbs and all that jazz. So where people and Sasquatches overlap, there's always a lot of sightings, essentially. So, and that's perfect for the NABC, because we're not just a museum and a gift shop. We are a research center. We want to use incoming information to drive our field research. And where there's a lot of sighting reports, that is perfect, because people are going to be bringing that stuff to us. So we get an opportunity to go out and check out these things that happened maybe yesterday or 2 days before, even the same day. We get very, very recent reports, probably on average once every 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes more, which keeps me very, very busy.
As if to drive Cliff's point home, during the making of this documentary, 2 people came into the museum to report strange vocalizations they had heard a few nights before, not far from the NABC. After speaking to them, one of them agreed to do an interview under the pretense of anonymity.
We flew in on Saturday and we're looking at things to do around Portland, and the Bigfoot Museum popped up. And we came out here, got to talking with people, and eventually asked a question and said, hey, we're only here for a couple days. is there anywhere around here where, maybe we could go and take a look and see if, we catch some activity? And one of the people working there said, yeah, absolutely. It's about 20 minutes away, and we had a recording there 2 days ago. And we went out and decided that was the place to go. So we drove up. We tried to get to the top of the trailhead. We couldn't. It was snowed out. So we backed up and we drove to where the trail splits. One section goes high, one section goes low. We decided to wait right on the side of the road right there. We were pretty tired. We had a 9-hour flight. So we decided to take a nap for an hour and then we would explore around the area. When we took the nap, we set it for an hour, both knocked out pretty much immediately. And about 13 minutes in, we have, the timer was going, so we know when we stopped it. We both got woken up to a vocalization. It continued for about 12, 13 seconds and then faded, and we didn't hear anything else for the rest of the night. But those 12 or 13 seconds were pretty spectacular. We both kind of looked at each other, stared at each other. Took us a second to realize even what happened. We rolled the window down just a little bit to hear, anything going on, any walking, anything like that. And we just sat there. We, said, holy crap, did we just hear what we think we heard? And it took us about 5 or 6 minutes of us saying that to each other before we were like, yeah, that actually happened.
With such a recent report, it was time to experience the next phase of what the NABC does best firsthand. That night, Cliff, Nico, Dave, and I headed out to the location of the report and began our night investigation.
Oh yeah, dude. We're gonna find a squatch tonight. We're going squatching.
So those guys, now you talked to them the other day, right? What did you tell them?
Well, so I told them, they were asking a lot of questions about, Sasquatch, the biology and science and behavior and all that, and they asked where to go, and I told them here.
Yeah. Well, apparently it worked. They came in on Tuesday when you were off, and they came in the late afternoon, kind of middle afternoon, and said that the night before, so this would have been Monday night, they were out there on the road where the road splits, and at that time they couldn't go any further because of snow. I mean, there's obviously a lot of snow now, but a lot of it's obviously melted away from them because they could not go any further. So that's where they parked their car. They made a fire because they said it was a 19-degree night. And they were just camping, hanging out by the fire, and from this direction, they heard a weird vocalization that neither one had ever heard before. Now, to me, that doesn't mean Bigfoot by any means, but what they described is strongly suggestive. They said that it wasn't a scream, it was more like a yell or a howl. It started at a certain pitch and then raised in pitch, went higher in pitch, and then just sat there and hung there for maybe 8 seconds or more with a little bit of vibrato, and then it dropped down into like a gravelly sort of growl thing. In other words, oh, Ohio howl. Mm-hmm. There's nothing out here that would make that sound except for a Sasquatch. This spot is well known. They have a ton of reports out of it, sounds, footprints. I know of at least 4 different observations of Sasquatches in this area. I mean, look around, man. We're behind a locked gate. There's snow everywhere. No one's out here at 11 o'clock at night making those noises. So, I mean, I think this is a great spot. And if there was one here just like the last couple nights, maybe they're here now.
So it sounds like we need to go, and we need to go make some sounds.
It's coming up on 11.
Yeah.
That's when they got that howl the other night.
Yeah.
After spending several hours in the snow, we didn't get any responses or suspicious activity. But that is the nature of field research. After decades of looking for Sasquatch, there's no one who understands this better than Cliff. So there's other methods he employs to keep the NABC's ears to the ground while everyone is in the shop.
Fieldwork is a huge component of the NABC. It's one of the three things that we focus on. Of course, there's educating the public, with our displays and outreach programs and things. There's the archiving work that we're doing, taking the historical collections and making sure that they're preserved. And then finally, we're using incoming information to drive our field research. And that idea really comes from my elementary school teaching days. When I was a teacher, it was always about, your students tell you what you need to be teaching. Your students will tell you that. You assess them, you find out what they're not very strong at, and you focus on that. So you use incoming data to drive your instruction. We're doing the same thing with Bigfoot at this point. When people bring us fresh information or even historical information, we look at where it happened and what we might be able to do about it. And a lot of the times we can be out at a location where somebody perhaps even saw a Sasquatch within 24 hours. That has happened several times. Or if we find a place that, you saw one down there, well, somebody else saw one there 3 weeks ago, and somebody else saw one there 2 years ago. Well, that suddenly becomes an area of interest. So we start scouting the area and going out to see what we can find. Now, my field work has really changed dramatically over the years. The Finding Bigfoot stuff is always at night, and that's partly because of TV stuff and spooky camera things and that sort of stuff. And also, it's kind of easier to get vocalizations. But vocalizations might tell you about the presence of the animals. But I'm trying to go deeper than that now. Most of my field work now is during the day, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I've already seen a Sasquatch through a thermal imager. I want a daytime sighting, and you just can't have a daytime sighting at night, so I go during the day. But also, my focus isn't the presence of the animals, because I'm already working in areas where I know they are. There's a lot of sightings in these particular areas. So now the next level is, which ones are there? Which Sasquatches are there, and what are they doing? Because that's how Paul got his footage. He started looking at, there's a lot of stuff happening at this beat-up place. And he started going there a lot. So we are going to the locations where there's a lot of Sasquatch reports, and basically, we're looking for footprints. We're walking muddy roads, not the graveled ones, but we're walking on muddy roads. We're trying to get out there at least once a week. Somebody on the team is trying to get out there at least once a week. Sometimes I go twice a week and just walk a few miles of roads and look for footprints. And we're being very successful, which has taught me a lot about the Sasquatch. We're actually learning quite a bit about these particular animals and these particular research groups. And hopefully what we're learning here can be applied to other areas in the country, but we don't know that yet. And doing this over the years has really taught me a lot. Like, first of all, these footprint casts that we're seeing in the books and you see that you can buy here or see on the wall here as evidence, that kind of stuff, they're extraordinary casts. Most footprints in the ground don't look that great. They're very, very messy. So when people tell me, it's like, well, how come we're not finding footprints all the time and stuff? I say, well, because you don't know what you're looking for, honestly. Sasquatches have large, soft, padded feet. And many times their footprints and whatever evidence, whatever marks are left in the ground are very subtle. Most people would just walk right over, I think even trackers would walk right over these things because they're just so hard to see. And I'm not a great tracker. I'm not saying I am. I'm a hobbyist probably at best, but I've kind of tuned my eyes a little bit. I can see these things a little more easily now than I could a couple years ago. We're gathering the information. We're trying to learn which animals are there, maybe why they're there, and maybe anticipate where they could be in the future. Because I sure would like to see one during the day. I'd love to film one and try to learn a little bit more about them in that way as well. But our work now isn't if they're real. If you're still asking if Bigfoots are real, you're behind the learning curve as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to know if they're real, I know that. I want to know how they live. And the only way to do that is to work like other field biologists would, essentially. Mammals are not, you don't learn about mammals by observing them directly usually. You can do that with deer and elk and stuff, but more elusive things, like the weasels and, wolverines and that kind of stuff, you hardly ever see them. The way you learn about what they do and what their needs are and their habits is you study what they leave behind, their footprints and their foraging sites. So that's what we're doing with Sasquatches now. We're approaching this like amateur wildlife biologists, studying what they leave behind and trying to piece together the puzzle.
The NABC's focus on studying the Sasquatch topic extends beyond its biological reality. It is also currently building an archive of historical documents and research notes from various historical researchers, adding to the value of the NABC as a research center.
So my name is Joanna Abbott, and I'm a volunteer here at the North American Bigfoot Center. I volunteer helping to put together the digital archive of all of the collections that Cliff and the rest of the team here have put together over the years. Well, I decided that I wanted to try and volunteer here at the museum and find out if there was something that I could do to help, because I had spent many years as kind of what I think of as an armchair researcher. I had read and watched and absorbed a lot of content about the subject, and I was very much interested, but I didn't have a great way of connecting with other people necessarily in my area who were interested in this, and so I thought that this would be a good outlet for some of my interest and starting to build a little bit more of a community about furthering my interest here. And so I contacted the museum to find out if they had any role for a volunteer, and it sounds like pretty much everybody agreed that helping out with the archive would be the best use for my talents and interest, and so I've been working on that for a little over a year now. So the process for archiving is that there's generally a set of files or documents that are on paper that need to be digitized, and so it generally involves taking a quick look at the document, determining what's in it, what the subject matter is, whose collection it's from, who the other people involved in that document might be, and then scanning it into the computer and giving it a file name and setting it up so that someday when the digital archive is available, it'll be easy to look up these resources online.
The NABC is not solely focused on collecting information from the big names of the Bigfoot world, but also the lesser-known Sasquatch researchers. One such collection that is in the process of being digitized and organized by Joanna belongs to Barbara Wasson.
Barbara Wasson was a researcher in the 1970s who was mainly in Oregon and parts of California, and she had a lot of correspondence with folks like Renata Hinden and John Green and George Haas and lots of the old familiar names that most of us know about. And so it's always fun running across those things in the archive and the documents, but she really devoted so much of her life and attention to this work. She was a clinical psychologist in her regular profession, and she did the Bigfoot research on the side, and so it's really fun to see the relationships that developed, particularly a friendship that she developed with another researcher named Joyce Kearney, who we have quite a bit of correspondence between Barbara and Joyce that sheds some light on their relationship and how they approached the subject of Sasquatch research in the 1970s and from the female perspective.
One of the reasons that archiving and studying this historic material is important is we can learn more about these cases in the past, and in some cases, kind of separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit, kind of figure out what was really going on back in the day. Because remember, back in the day, they weren't standing on their own shoulders. Like, we're standing on John Green's shoulders. We're standing on Barbara Wasson's shoulders. We're standing on all these people, these historic figures' shoulders who came before us. So we have the benefit of learning from them. Back in 1972, back in the 1960s or 58, they didn't have that luxury. They were pioneers. They were the vanguard of the subject. So nowadays we can look back and have the advantage of time to kind of look at these things. And a great example of that came from the Barbara Wasson collection. Barbara, in her opening chapter of the book, talks about going to Reston, Oregon, and casting some footprints that were found like a week or so before. I have the cast in the cast collection, the original, and it's always been a kind of a funny looking cast, but I figured it was just old and rain got it or something. Well, Fast forward 6 years, one of the other things that came to the museum from a guy named Walt, who lives out on the coast of Oregon here, are these big fake stompers that were carved, out of alder tree with boots stuck on the top. These wonky old stompers. And when I got the stompers from Walt, he was telling me like how he got the stompers, where they came from. We're still kind of trying to piece that together. But he said one of the first times he ever used them was at a shake mill in Reston, Oregon. And I went, wait a minute. I wonder if that's the same shake mill that Barbara Wasson cast, And then he's telling me this story about there's these two kids living at the mill and the guy who had it in the horse corral and all this stuff, and how he used to get paid for telling researchers like I found footprints and that stuff. It's like kind of weird, shady business. But nonetheless, I started piecing things together. So I have the transcript of Walt's interview when he gave me the casts or the stompers. And of course, I compared that to Barbara's book, and I'm going back and forth. I go, oh my God, Barbara was hoaxed. These footprint stompers made Barbara's cast. So I got the cast out. Yeah, and sure enough, they're a match. They're a match. So unfortunately for Barbara, that one cast that she got in her research career turned out to be hoaxed. But we have the benefit now of knowing a little bit more of the truth. Because, Sasquatches are real animals. They're actually out there. But whether we like it or not, hoaxing is part of the history of the subject. And that sort of thing should be explored. Maybe not celebrated, but it definitely should be explored and at least talked about. We can't hide that under a rug or something like that.
I think the value of the archive is really that it lends a historical perspective to the things that we're seeing and observing today, the things that we now think of as fairly normal in terms of what we see in encounter reports and sightings and behaviors and sounds and those sorts of things. When we look back through an archive and get the historical perspective, that those perspectives and observations have been seen for sometimes hundreds of years in some cases, it really lends validity to the overall nature of the subject. I don't know that it'll ever be done. I think the more that the word gets out there that this archive exists and the work that we're doing is going to be so beneficial to the rest of the community, my genuine hope is that it continues to have things coming into the museum to be added to the archive. Hopefully it sparks people's memories that, Uncle so-and-so had that box of Bigfoot stuff in the garage and now we know where we can send it. I really hope that it's never done, honestly.
The future of the NABC at this moment is kind of wide open. I mean, I have my hopes and dreams, of course. We'll see where this thing goes. But to me, the North American Bigfoot Center is kind of like a piece of art. How do you know when you're done with a piece of art? At some point, I guess you either put it down or you die. I don't think I can put this one down. I think I'm in this one. I'm a lifer. This is what I'm doing the rest of my life. And the North American Bigfoot Center is by far the most meaningful occupation I've ever had. And I was a teacher. That's saying something. That's a pretty rewarding career, but this is far more rewarding. And I don't know where it's going to take me. I think it's important. The historical stuff, yeah, obviously that's really important. The field work, I really enjoy that. So that's important to me. But I think the educational part might be the legacy that maybe has the longest echoes, so to speak, because when you look at all the atrocities that our species has subjected the other species on the planet to, even our own, the genocides and wars and all those evils, all of those things are always born out of ignorance, all of them. So the educational side of the NABC might have the longest lasting effects, especially after Sasquatches are proven to be real animals. I mean, I know they're real. I've seen one, right? So it seems to me like discovery is inevitable someday, hopefully during my lifetime, And I would like to perhaps cushion the blow of discovery a little bit, because discovery might be the worst thing that ever happened to a Bigfoot, exploitation in zoos and stuff like that. Nobody wants that for them, so perhaps, and now that TV shows and stuff, they treat them as monsters, as things that are scary and, and like all these horrible things. And they're not like that. They're like gorillas, but probably more than gorillas. They might be even more closely related to us than we dream. Education is the only way out of that, So if we could educate the public, yeah, they're real. Yeah, they're really out there. And there's really nothing to fear. I mean, don't mess with them. I mean, really, brown bears aren't out to get you either, but they'll kill you if they have to. These are wild animals and should be respected as such, but they should not be treated as monsters. And maybe, I mean, I'm an optimist, so maybe learning about them, about another biped on the planet that we're so closely related to in our own backyard, maybe somehow that'll lead us to leave a smaller footprint on the planet, ironically.
In less than a decade, the NABC has left a mark on everyone who stepped foot through its doors, from the regular passerbys to the people who've had experiences. It is a place that is like no other.
And it's just amazing how much Bigfoot has changed my life. And if you are watching this because you're like, Bigfoot, it's funny and you think it's ridiculous, and that's okay. And because everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I just thank everyone for just even watching this, and I'm just grateful to be a part of that world and everything that Bigfoot's brought into my world. I mean, I met my husband, my dog. The two most favorite things in my life came from Bigfoot, and I just hope that people that come through our museum learn something or just have fun and enjoy laughing and just joy. I hope they experience joy.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's truly great because we're going to be able to teach people about Sasquatch in a way that's not joking about it, in a scientific way, and we'll be able to show them the evidence. And Cliff's a great spokesperson in that. And I will be, and I told Cliff when I started here, I will be the bottom rung of the ladder. I don't need to have my face on camera. I don't need to, I will sweep up behind you, basically. Every team needs a guy like that, right? And that's me.
I think it's a great place anybody who comes in here can have some kind of entertainment or value out of it. If you don't believe in Bigfoot, so what? But you might see something you've never seen before, and it just might, make you think of other things that you never thought. If you are into Bigfoot, there's still tons of stuff in there that you're going to see that you've never seen before. And it's a great place for people to come, even if they have something to talk about that they've seen or heard. They can come here and talk, and nobody's going to give them grief. We're going to be like, okay, let's hear it. So this is a safe place, and I'm proud of it. I'm just proud of the fact that we have given people a place to go to enjoy this subject in the way it should be. I mean, we give it respect. It isn't a joke around here. It's a real deal, and we take it that way.
I love the museum. I think it's really set apart by the fact that it's a science museum. It demonstrates the evidence and the data that's behind the research that goes into this phenomenon. I think there's great historical perspectives, obviously, but also it's constantly changing, and there's always new information being added and new displays going up and new items coming in. So it's really exciting to see how it's growing and evolving, all the time.
We are an archive. We are an education place. Like there's so many parts of this museum that make it more important than just your roadside biggest rubber band ball attraction. It's important for the science of this because there's so much misinformation and just plain wrong facts out there that having the data that can speak for itself all coalesced in one place and educating the people who are either open to the subject or need the information, that is what is part of the value of this place, of this museum, this center. It's, emotional and mental stability. The museum and the folks I work with have helped me through a lot of tough times, helping me get my passion project, the fossil team, off the ground. They're giving me opportunities that I never thought I would have. And even another level on that, the fact that Bigfoot is giving me those opportunities. That's just crazy in itself. So yeah, the museum is important, and there will come a day that this fossil team stuff gets way too crazy and takes up way more of my time, but I'm still going to be with the museum until the day I die, or it blows up.
It's not just telling you what to think, it's making you think. I think our exhibits are compelling. I think we have a lot to offer in that way of like really getting into like those deep questions that people have. But what about this? What about that? And I think we do a good job answering it. In the future, I feel like I just want to keep growing, and I think we're going to have to get another building eventually because we are expanding quite a bit and we're running out of room. And I could see us maybe adding on and possibly maybe even branching out and having a couple other Bigfoot museums. I mean, why not spread it around? Like, that would be so fun to have some people, you know, join in on our family.
There's a fair number of Bigfoot and crypto museums throughout the country, and having visited many of them, I love them all. I love them all, by the way. But I see that the owner's personality is in each and every one of them. And I think that's cool, and that's what they should be, because in a way, a museum's a piece of art, and it should reflect the owners and the designers, right? And looking around here, yeah, I see myself here, because at the end of the day, I'm a science nerd. I mean, I was a teacher, for goodness sake, and I love teaching science. I'm a science nerd, and I think the information and data and evidence is really important and super, super cool. So when I look around, this is the exact sort of place I would have loved to visit when I first started Bigfooting. I think I could have learned a lot from future Cliff.
It is undeniable the passion that Cliff and Melissa have for the NABC. But it's also apparent the love and care that the team has for it as well. That's not a common factor in many workplaces, but it is at the NABC. Perhaps it is the genuine passion for the subject that the whole team shares, or the friendly and inclusive atmosphere they've created, but I know that as the museum continues to grow, it will only get more impressive. But the NABC is more than just a Sasquatch museum. It's symbolic of a choice that we all have in our lives, to either stick to the certainty and stability of a known path, or to pursue our passion, no matter how rough the road gets, to make our younger selves proud.